What are the best poker thin value betting spots? Have you ever wondered when to make those tricky thin value bets in poker? It can be a game changer if you know the right spots. Thin value betting is all about betting with a hand that is not the strongest but still has a chance to win. You want to bet in situations where you think your opponent might call with worse hands. Let's break down some of the best spots for thin value betting. First, consider when an obvious scare card falls on the river. This is when a card appears that could complete a strong hand or a bluff. Your opponent may think you are bluffing a lot, so they might call with weaker hands. This is a perfect time to thin value bet with a hand that has some showdown value. Next, think about your overall betting range. If you have been bluffing a lot in the hand, your opponent will likely adjust by calling more often with a wider range of hands. This means you can profitably thin value bet with hands that are not very strong because your opponent is calling lighter than usual. Another great situation is in check-down pots. When there has been little or no betting on the flop and turn, players usually have weaker ranges. In these cases, you can thin value bet more freely because your opponents are less likely to hold strong hands. They might call with marginal holdings, allowing you to extract value. You should also look for spots where you can put your opponent on an elastic calling range. This means you can predict that your opponent will call with enough worse hands to make your bet profitable. If you cannot estimate their calling range, then thin value betting becomes risky. Lastly, consider when you have a hand with showdown value that is only marginally strong. For example, if you hold a second pair or a top pair with a weak kicker on a board where your opponent checks the river, this can be a thin value spot. If you have represented bluffs earlier in the hand, or if your opponent's range is wide, it could be a good time to bet. In practice, thin value betting requires careful analysis of both your perceived range and your opponent's likely holdings. It is important to avoid betting thinly without considering these factors. If you do not, you risk losing value or getting called by better hands. So remember, the best poker thin value betting spots are those where your opponent is likely to call with weaker hands. Look for scare cards, adjust your betting range, check down pots, and predict your opponent's calling range. By mastering these spots, you can maximize your long-term winnings and extract extra value from your marginal hands.